deep, resonant voice, urgent yet measured. Imagine a land so ancient, so vibrant, that its rivers have sung songs of civilization for millennia, a land of poets, philosophers, and unparalleled artistry. Now, imagine that land, arbitrarily carved up, not along natural lines, not by the will of its people, but by the decree of a distant empire. This is not a work of fiction. This is the story of Bengal, 1905, and it is a story of British betrayal. We begin with a stark question. What if your home, your culture, your very identity, was deemed an inconvenience to a foreign power's administrative convenience? What if that power, cloaked in the guise of progress, chose to divide and conquer, not with armies but with a pen? This was the reality for millions of Bengalis when Lord Curzon, the Viceroy of India, a man with an almost pathological belief in British superiority, unilaterally decided to partition Bengal. It was a decision that ripped through the heart of a unified people, igniting a firestorm of protest that would echo through the annals of Indian history. The British narrative then and now painted this act as a purely administrative necessity. Curzon himself claimed it was to improve governance, to make the vast province of Bengal, then comprising Bengal proper, Bihar, Orissa, and Assam, more manageable. But let's peel back the layers of this so-called progress. Let's look at the facts. Bengal in 1905 was the intellectual and political heartland of burgeoning Indian nationalism. It was a crucible of new ideas, a hotbed of resistance. Bengali literature, theater, and journalism were powerful forces, articulating a growing sense of self-awareness and a yearning for Swaraj self-rule. The British, astute as they were in the art of control, saw this vibrant energy as a threat, and their solution, divide and dismember. Curzon's plan, finalized and announced with little consultation, was audacious in its dismissiveness of local sentiment. The province was to be split into two: Western Bengal, predominantly Hindu, and Eastern Bengal and Assam, with a Muslim majority. On the surface, it might seem like a simple administrative division, but a deeper examination reveals the insidious intent. Historians, both Indian and British, have long debated the motivations behind the partition. While surface-level justifications of administrative efficiency were presented, the underlying strategy was clear: divide and rule. By creating a Muslim-majority province in the east, the British aimed to weaken the growing Hindu-Muslim unity that was becoming a powerful force against their rule. They sought to foster communal tensions, to pit one community against another, thereby weakening the nationalist movement as a whole. This wasn't a random act. The decision was meticulously crafted. The official justification, as articulated by Curzon and his subordinates, was that the existing province was too large for effective administration. Bengal had a population of over 78 million people. Curzon argued that the lieutenant governor of Bengal couldn't properly govern such a vast territory, with its remote areas and diverse populations. He spoke of administrative divisions and greater efficiency. But let's look at the actual proposed divisions. The new province of Eastern Bengal and Assam was to have a population of 31 million, with 18 million Muslims and 12 million Hindus. Western Bengal, along with Bihar and Orissa, would retain a Hindu majority. The argument for administrative convenience began to crumble under scrutiny. If the goal was purely efficiency, why not divide along lines that acknowledged existing cultural and linguistic affinities? Why create a new administrative unit that geographically encompassed disparate regions like Assam and Bengal? The evidence of a deliberate strategy to sow discord is compelling. Curzon and his advisors were well aware of the religious landscape of Bengal. They understood the potential for communal friction. By creating a Muslim-majority province, they hoped to cultivate a sense of separate interests, to draw Muslims away from the nationalist struggle, and to present themselves as protectors of minority communities. This was a classic imperial tactic, honed over centuries of colonial rule. The date that sealed Bengal's fate in this regard was July 20th, 1905. On this day, The partition of Bengal was formally announced. The public reaction was immediate and ferocious. It was a wave of protest that swept across Bengal, a testament to the deep-seated unity and pride of its people. The response was not confined to eloquent speeches or reasoned petitions. It was a visceral, emotional outpouring of grief and anger. The day of the partition, October 16, 1905, was declared a day of mourning. Bengalis observed a hardle, a complete shutdown of businesses and activities. People walked barefoot, bathed in the Ganges, and tied rakis, a symbol of brotherhood, on each other's wrists, pledging to boycott British goods and support indigenous industries. This was the birth of the Swadeshi movement, a powerful expression of economic and political self-reliance. It was more than just a protest. It was a cultural awakening. People boycotted British cloth, salt, and sugar. They embraced Indian-made products. They established national schools and colleges, fostering a new generation of leaders independent of British influence. The literary and artistic output of this period was extraordinary, fueled by patriotism and a profound sense of injustice. Songs like Amar Sonar Bangla, which would later become the national anthem of Bangladesh, were born out of this very struggle. The British government, however, remained largely unmoved by the scale of this resistance. Their response was to suppress dissent, to arrest prominent leaders, and to dismiss the protests as the work of a vocal minority. Lord Minto, Curzon's successor, continued to uphold the partition, further solidifying the perception of British intransigence. How did they commit these acts? It was a systematic application of imperial power. They had the legislative authority to decree such changes. They controlled the press, often disseminating their own version of events. They had the police and security forces to quell any unrest. And they had a deeply ingrained belief in their own righteousness, a conviction that they knew what was best for India, even if it meant dismantling its social fabric. The partition of Bengal was a calculated blow to Indian unity. The British understood that a united India was a threat to their empire. By creating artificial divisions based on religion, they aimed to prevent the emergence of a strong, cohesive nationalist movement. They sowed seeds of discord that would, tragically, continue to bear bitter fruit for decades to come. The immediate impact on the ground was devastating. Families were separated, trade routes disrupted, and economic hardship intensified. For many, it was a profound emotional trauma, a feeling of being disconnected from their ancestral lands and their shared heritage. The division was not just on a map. It was a severing of deep cultural and familial ties. The arguments for administrative convenience were always a smokescreen. The real goal was political control. The British were adept at exploiting existing social cleavages, and in Bengal, they saw an opportunity to advance their agenda by amplifying religious differences. They presented the Muslims of eastern Bengal as a distinct entity, deserving of their own administration, thereby undermining the shared identity that had been forged over centuries. The legacy of Curzon's partition is undeniable and deeply problematic. While the partition of Bengal was eventually annulled in 1911, largely due to the unrelenting pressure from the Swadeshi movement and the sheer scale of the unrest, the damage had been done. The seeds of communal division, once sown, proved difficult to uproot. The wounds inflicted by this act of imperial arrogance would continue to fester, contributing to the later tragedy of partition in 1947. Many historians argue that the 1905 partition was a dress rehearsal for the larger, more devastating partition that would forever scar the subcontinent. It set a precedent, a dangerous precedent, of prioritizing imperial interests over the well-being and unity of the people. It demonstrated how easily an empire could exploit religious identities for political gain. The story of Curzon's partition is a powerful reminder that history is not always written by the victors in a way that benefits the vanquished. It is a story that demands we look beyond the official pronouncements and the sanitized versions of events. It compels us to ask who truly benefited from these decisions, and at what cost. The partition of Bengal in 1905 was not just an administrative rearrangement. It was a deliberate act of imperial policy, designed to weaken a rising tide of nationalism by fracturing a people along religious lines. It was a betrayal of trust, a disregard for cultural identity, and a profound act of division that would have reverberating consequences. So, as we reflect on this dark chapter, we must ask ourselves, when the architects of empire redraw the lines of a nation for their own convenience, who ultimately pays the price for their hubris? The answer, etched in the tears and struggles of millions, is a chilling indictment of power wielded without conscience.